We would like to once again welcome you to our panel today, organized by Hrant Dink Foundation. So this is a panel on learning practices in memorialization. We initially planned to host two panelists today from abroad, but unfortunately Veronica Hager will not be with us today. She's currently having an illness. Instead, we will host Aslı Yolcu from 23.5 Hrant Dink Site of Memory. As part of today's panel, we would like to dwell into sites of memory and museums and how they experience as they work on practices of coming to terms with, and also how all these memory studies help us in times of technology as well as innovative approaches. I wish Veronica Hager would be with us today because this would give us more in-depth insights, but I will also do my best to provide information from our own memory museum for historical justice. So our panelist is Piotr Poplawski. He has held various positions at the Cyber Memorial Museum, including Head of Educational and Cultural Projects since 2017. Previously, he served as Exhibition Manager and Chief Guide at Daikosin Castle, and he completed his PhD in History at the University of Bialystok. In fact, he has been a veteran working with us over the years. He has significantly contributed to Hrant Dink Foundation's activities. So since the very inception of the Hrant Dink Site of Memory, he has been with us. So I would like to keep introduction as brief as possible and give more time to our panelists, and then I would like to also have substantial time for our Q&A session. Let me start with somewhat a grim picture, because we are people who have been making efforts on memorialization, and we are faced with significant global challenges. So we live in an era where there is not interest at all, neither in the past nor in the present moment or future, because we are living in an era where hedonism is praised. Everyone talks about being in the moment. Against such a backdrop, it becomes even more difficult to elaborate on the past. And if we are to once again say never again, then we also need to stand up for that at a time when a genocide is happening right next door. But this brings us to the question, to what extent we can actually say never again, and to what extent we can mobilize against these acts. So this is a significant challenge for us. And then, of course, there is this existential crisis we are faced with. We live in a world that is fully materialistic, and this is a brand new construct of living, and we lose our values all across the globe. As you're well aware, the culture sphere has been reduced to Instagram. We have very rapid production and consumption of content on social media, and if we are to think of memorialization in such a context, then we also need to acknowledge both its advantages and disadvantages. So maybe this is not the most optimistic introduction, but I believe we still need to ask the following question. We still have the belief and motivation that memorialization studies would eventually contribute to democracy, but where does this motivation come from? And of course, our answers to this question might vary, but as people that seek the truth, we are persisting in this struggle, and that's why we work with different disciplines. We seek innovative and creative methods. So this is in a way an imperative for all of us, and this is where we drive our motivation from. Perhaps we can elaborate more on this question, and we can collectively seek answers to this challenge. And here at this point, learning practices in memorialization come to the fore, because we want to seek creative, innovative methods, and we have to discuss all these learning techniques in order to bridge the past with the present. Then we have the archives and museums. They are very important institutions of collective memory, and they also serve as a memory space. Museums, sites of memory, archives, but they also offer us spaces for active learning. When we look into the mission of any museum, its learning programs are always targeting the present and the future, even if that the museum deals with the past. So when we talk about education and learning programs, we always think of how we will be carrying this past into the future. And in fact, it is through education and learning programs that these museums take us to the future and bridge this gap. And actually we see a common thread when we look into education and learning programs, one that denies didactism, any hierarchy between the learner and teacher, one that also denies any vertical approaches, but rather embraces horizontal approaches, that invites people from different walks of life, different ethnicities, different cultural backgrounds, where everyone's input is welcome in rebuilding the future. So after this brief introduction, let me turn to our panelist, Piotr Poplawski. In fact, most of us are not familiar with his topic, because this is a very specific historical topic, and he will actually talk about this memorialization effort, and then we will turn to Aslı. Over to you, Piotr.
Marhaba, thank you for the... Okay, I'm back. So thank you for the warm welcome and the hospitality. I feel very, very honored to be here on the conference. I will move to my presentation in a moment. I just need to be sure it's back here. I come to you from Białystok, Poland. It's a 300,000 citizen city in northeastern part of my country. So it's not the capital. It's just a, let's say, regional city, and I want to present you some information about the museum I'm working in. Okay. That's the first slide, and I will focus on educational and cultural programs. However, I will give you a brief background presentation of the history that happened and started all of this. So, on 23rd of August 1939, the German Third Reich and the Soviet Union signed the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, which divided Central Eastern Europe between the two totalitarianisms, the Nazi Third Reich and the Soviet Union. And on this map, we have several information about these divisions, the planned one on the left and the actual territorial changes in 1939 and 1940. What I wanted to stress is that this isn't the story of Poles only. It's a story of Central European nations and ethnical groups, and we try to present it in our exhibition. Some of the programs I will present today are also linking this history of Poles, Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians, Finns, Moldovans, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Russians, because Russians were also victims of the Soviet politics. In fact, talking about this topic should start in 16th century, but I don't want to present the whole story of deportations. The first of them were carried out by the Tsars of Russia in 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. However, the main focus of the museum is to present the Soviet deportations from World War II time and post-World War II time, because the last of them was carried out in 1952. So Hitler and the Nazi concentration camps didn't exist for 7 years, while Stalin still was conducting this terror of deportations and stressing out again, not only Poles, but citizens of Central Eastern Europe. So on 23rd of August, Poland and Central Eastern Europe's fate was sealed with this pact. On 1st of September 1939, Poland was attacked by the Germans. After 17 days, on 17th of September, the Soviets joined them. It is not because they felt less responsible for the war. They wanted to see what will be the reaction of the Western powers, of France, of Great Britain, and after seeing that they declared war to Germany, but they did nothing or very little to support Poland, they felt secure with joining the war, and they already had the Polish troops fighting with the Germans, so it was easier for the Soviets to attack later. So that was very clever and typical for the Soviet politics. It resulted in the division of Poland in 1939 with 2 occupations. The blue colors indicate the German occupation zone. You probably heard of some of the German terror, like the concentration camps, like Auschwitz, and other places where people were exterminated in gas chambers. The Soviet occupation zone was almost half of Polish territory, indicated with green color, and it also brought terror to Polish and not only Polish citizens. The Soviet repressions in 1939-1941 period were of 5 types: the deportations, the Gulag system, massacres, Sovietization, and forced conscription. In the museum, in the Sibir Memorial Museum, we focus on 3 of these because 2 of them are scarcely researched. We don't know much about forced conscription, and the Sovietization as a process is very wide, and we can tell about it only having the rest covered. So now we have good research on deportations, Gulag system, and on massacres, including the Katyn massacre, when 22,000 Polish officers were killed by the Soviets in 1940. Their families, among others, were deported in 1940 and 1941. And some of the Polish state representatives, policemen, officials, teachers were sent to the Gulag camp as Soviet prisoners. So out of these 5 repression matters, we focus on 3 of them in the exhibition because we have material for this. And the main topic is to present the fate of the deportees and the victims of the Gulag system. We don't cover widely the Katyn massacre because there is a Katyn massacre museum in Warsaw, the capital of Poland, so we don't want to compete with them. We are cooperating actually. So 2 of these are presented, and the timeline is between 1939 and 41, and then between 1944 and 52. As I mentioned, post-war Soviet Union was also a scene of deportations and Gulag camps. So the victims of this are called in Polish Sybiraks. In the Russian language, a Sibirak is a person who lives in Siberia, but in its cruelty, the Soviets deported people there meant to make them live there. The deportations were not really a punishment in the eyes of the Soviets. It was a way to resettle a group of people before they will become the enemies of the state. So, for instance, if there was a family of a teacher, they would be deported altogether, a whole family, not a single person, from the Polish occupied territories to Siberia, to prevent this family from organizing resistance or other matters against the Soviet Union. Okay, and such people were named Sibiraks, like the people living in Siberia. What is important is that we have to stress that they not necessarily ended up in geographical Siberia. Some of them, 40% actually, ended in Kazakhstan. Some of them ended in European part of the Soviet Union in the far north. Okay, so saying about Sibiraks, I mean people who were deported in the depths of Soviet Union. Some of them even ended in Caucasus region covered by the Soviet Union. And this is where the museum comes. Poland was a communist state until 1989. After regaining full sovereignty, the movement of Sibiraks, people who were victims of these Soviet actions, started to exist officially. Previously, they were talking only within their families. It was forbidden to talk publicly about this topic. So they thought that a museum should be made. And such a museum was created. Białystok is over here where the pin is indicated, so it's northeastern Poland, near the border with Belarus. Until 1993, this was the border with the Soviet Union. Okay, so we were a place very close to the former Soviet Polish border. But what is even more curious and unique about Białystok, it is the only big city in Poland, pre-war Poland, which was taken by the Soviets in 1939 and left to Poland after 1945. The remaining part of the state, which was taken by the Soviets, the eastern part, is no longer Poland. Okay, it's now in Ukraine, in Belarus, in Lithuania. So Białystok is the only area taken by the Soviets in 1939 that was given back to Poland. So this made us the only territory on the Polish soil nowadays which was affected by the Soviet occupation. And this was the only possible choice of the seat of a museum that covers the topic of deportations. This is the museum building. The red brick building in the background on the right, it's the pre-war Polish military warehouse. That was used during World War II by the Soviet NKVD, the secret police, for their own purposes, like storage of ammunition and weapon, but also the NKVD organized the deportations right from the place where the museum is right now. You can see railway tracks, because the Soviets were organizing deportations with trains. They put people in the trains, and this station was used for such a process, for the people living in Białystok and its surroundings. So it's not only a museum, an exhibition, a collection. It is also a place of remembrance where around 20,000 people from the city and its surroundings were packed in cattle cars, transport trains, not personal carriers, but transport carriers, and sent to Siberia. The travel lasted for 2, 3, sometimes 7 weeks in inhuman conditions. So we covered this topic in the exhibition, but today I will not focus on the exhibition itself. I will focus on the cultural and educational programs we have and the way we are teaching, especially young people, but also other people about the past and what they can take from it in learning about the present and especially the future. One thing that I have to remind or recall is when we were opening on 17th of September, it's the anniversary of the Soviet aggression on Poland in 1939. We thought it's a historical museum. The topic is closed. Nobody predicted that in half a year in February 2022, it will become present, not a history, because the Russians attacked Ukraine and started deportations. Again, there are deportations of people from Ukraine, not necessarily only Ukrainians, but also Russians, Poles living there. So the story happens again. So it's not a museum only about history. It's a museum also about contemporary events that are happening in front of our eyes. And now I will make a short characteristic of the education and cultural programs we have in the museum. They are divided in 6 fields. The department responsible for these programs is run by me. I'm the manager, and I have 3 colleagues on full-time and 1 colleague on part-time, so it's 5 people altogether. Education covers both schools and families with individuals, and also we have special groups. I will give you an example. For instance, we are working on a program to visit prisons, people who are in prisons, and tell them about this story, because it's also important to reach groups that are excluded. We also reach groups who are disabled and cannot come to the museum for different reasons. Okay, so that is important to include as many groups as possible. On one hand, this is inclusive. On the other hand, it's also attracting other people. Okay, it's presenting the institution as an open one. Accessibility. This is what I mentioned, and also we have an accessibility officer or coordinator, a person who is responsible for making the museum accessible to those people. When we were opening, we actually had physical accessibility for wheelchairs, some lifts, some special items that were designed for the people with disabilities. But we also consulted them with foundations and groups which are working with them. Sometimes people who are disabled were consultants. So from the very beginning, we were working on making it as accessible as possible, because it's a huge group and it's growing. More and more people are affected by various disabilities, so we need to be open for them. And we are a flagship institution in the region working with disabled people. So we are networking other museums, being a kind of a leader, telling them what we done, learning what they did, and brainstorming what can be done to improve this field. The next field is training, and it is important to tell about the program that we invented. We call it the Museum Academia. We started with a program for guides. And to be honest, it was to make things easier for our employees, because we wanted to train guides to guide instead of us. So that was quite clever, but it turned out to be very useful for us and for them, because they can earn money, they come to us, they don't have to pay for the tickets for themselves, but they can collect the money from the group for guiding. The tickets are paid for the museum, but the guiding fee is for the guide from the outside. So it attracts the local guiding community to come, because they can earn money, which is very useful for such a place. And we are having a free advertisement in the same way. So both sides are happy with this solution. So we started with guides, but the program was so successful that the employees wanted to participate as well. Basically, this program was telling the story, giving tools to be a guide, but also telling about accessibility, telling about the museum, about how to work with guests, to be good hosts, learning languages, some simple terms in foreign languages. And the last stage was a program for teachers. It was a program addressed to teachers because in Poland we have a system of advances for teachers. It's an official system. So if you want to advance, you have to participate in trainings. And we made such a training, so they came for the advance, and we gave them tools. If you want to come with a group, don't go with the group to the exhibition with the guide or with audio guide or on your own. Hire an educator, and they will make a program for your group, suited for the group. So it won't take 2.5 hours like a regular guide, because children have the attention span of let's say 45, 50 minutes, no more. So we made a reduced program. So the teachers are learning about that program. They know that they have tools for a proper workshop, not a full scale, which would exhaust their pupils or students, but a shorter one. So it became also very useful for them, and they feel partners with us, not guests, but partners. And teachers are coming back after participating in this program. They are coming back because they know that the museum is their partner, not a kind of a figure above them, which is teaching them, but also giving them tools how to work with school children or students. The next part is the exhibitions. We have an exhibition department in the museum, but we also cover some temporary exhibitions in our department. An example is the exhibit of the month cycle. Each month we do a presentation of one family who donated exhibits to the museum, and they are the main protagonists in that month. So we present only their items, and they feel very important in that time. And we invite the local media, a school group, so they can conversate with the family members. Sometimes it's an opportunity for the family to meet together in the museum and conversate about the presented objects. So they feel very, very important with that program. I will come back to this in the case study part of my presentation, which will soon start. Volunteers programs. We have two types of such programs: for action volunteers, like singular actions once a year, twice a year, and long-term programs, cooperation with departments, with collection department, with scientific department. So they come to us like once a week or twice a week and participate in these programs. And the biggest one, cultural programs, which consists of 5 main parts described here. I will focus on one of them, the Memorial Peloton. But apart from that, we have 4 other elements which cover, and it might be surprising because we are a memorial museum about history, but we decided that people who are familiar with history, interested in history, they will come to us anyway. So how to reach out other groups? That's the question. So we searched for solutions covering other groups who are interested in sports, in music, in cultural events. And the Sibir Memorial Run is an event that is addressed to runners. But we also make some, how to say it, theater plays during that. Small plays, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. People running are seeing it, okay? You can stop or you can just pass by. And the medals for the runners are given by Sibiraks, the witnesses, okay? So they feel important again. They are giving the medals. One exhibit is on the medal itself. So it also is a very important event for the family because they feel very, very honored. The museum's night is a topic that is present in most of the museums, so I will not describe it here. The Siberian Salon of Ambient is a musical event. Ambient music is present in our exhibition. We got great reviews about the music quality in the exhibition, so we thought, okay, let's explore that field. People who love music, and Białystok is the Polish capital of electronic music right now with a grand festival of this. So we cooperate with them and attract people who normally would never visit such a museum, but they want to listen to the music. And then they see, okay, it's a beautiful institution. Maybe we should have a tour on the exhibition. Even if it's 2 or 3% of the participants, it's still good for us, okay? And we have meetings with travelers, with scientists, which are inspiring the participants, like to discuss, to learn their own family history. So this is the description of the programs we are running. Some statistics about the programs for the 3 years we are operating in. So in educational programs, we had several thousand participants each year, and you can see that the number is growing slowly but steadily in this year, but previously we had a huge growth of 36-37%. It's not about numbers only, but it shows that still there is some space that we can develop in. Okay, so you can see that each year several thousand children, because it's school groups only and family groups only, visit the museum and participate in these special programs that are shorter, fit to the attention span of teenagers and children. And the cultural program statistics, also several thousand participants during 3 years. The biggest events we have is the Museums Night, but it's no surprise, and the Sibir Memorial Run. But now we are working on popularizing the Memorial Peloton, which will be described in a moment. And the volunteer program, which included 30 participants. Now we are working with 14 volunteers in the long-term program. The Museum Academia had 7 cycles, teachers, guides, employees of the museum. And the exhibit of the month had 21 cycles. Each month we have one, so one family. Now we have 21 families covered. This is a good example of how can we cooperate with the donors, the people who are giving the exhibits. They become the protagonists and they feel very important, and we can present new exhibits in this way, because the museum in the moment of the opening had 3,000 exhibits. It's not much. But when we opened, we were flooded with new exhibits, and the question what to do with them. Yeah, so we thought, okay, let's make a cycle where we present some new exhibit each month, and it's good for us. So now 2 case studies. First is a cultural program. I have like 5 minutes. Outfit. The Memorial Peloton. The idea behind this program is to visit places related to the history. As you can see in the picture, we have an archival picture and a modern picture from the event. The picture on the left shows the German-Soviet meeting in Białystok in 1939, when both armies met in our city and divided Poland physically. And we visit this place with the participants on bicycles. And there is a map, you can follow the trail, people are participating. We started in Białystok, and the goal was to present a history from grand events, like the division of Europe in 1939, to micro-histories, where we present stories of single families. So we can show that a single family was important. We don't want to present grand events only, but also the fate of 1, 2, 3, or 4 families, where they lived, what they did, what happened to them. Because it's closer to people to listen for a micro-history of a single family than to a political history of a whole state. That is the result. It's one of the results. In the previous year, we had like 400 participants in the Peloton. This year, 350, and it happened in 4 places: Białystok, Vilnius, Riga, and Moldova, for the first time in Moldova. In the next year, we have already signed an agreement with a museum in Tallinn, which will probably organize a Peloton. And we are cooperating with Kiev Holodomor Museum, so if the situation improves, they might also organize one. We also have another case study on memorialization by education. I want to present you how we use modern tools, but not only them, for reaching to the teenagers. We have a workshop called They Came at Dawn, addressed for teenagers. Apart from having some elements, these are like fragments of this workshop. First, they are asked to give their connotations, what Siberia is related, what are their thoughts about Siberia, the deportations and the war, to learn what they know about it. Then we present a soundless movie, so they only look at it. Then they have the opportunity to make a discussion, what would they pack in a suitcase if they were deported. And then we move to a thing that we also invented. We use the silent disco system. It's a system where you can listen to your own music on a party, let's say, but we don't play music. We play testimonies of victims. And as they don't hear each other, they have headphones, they cannot talk, so they listen. And it's surprising because otherwise people don't listen to testimonies. they just talk, discuss, or don't care, especially teenagers. But if they don't have any opportunity to speak, they listen. And then when they take it off, they start the discussion immediately because they listened to what was said to them. And that's a very strong result we achieved. Then we have a discussion about universalism of this, presenting the stories of deported people from Poland, but also victims of war in Ukraine, Yugoslavia, opposition in Belarus, and other conflicts among the world. Meetings with Sibiraks sometimes occur during those events, those workshops, sorry, and it's even stronger because then they don't listen to the testimony that is recorded, but they listen to an actual witness of such situation. Sometimes it's linked with the presentation of the exhibits donated by such a family. And it's again very intimate because it's not a teacher, it's a witness, eyewitness of such a story, and it's a very strong, like you can see in the picture, the children are like, wow. You can see it from their reaction that it's making a strong impact on it. I already told you about the accessibility and flexibility, and we're short of time, so that's all for my presentation right now. And thank you for your attention.
Evet, Peter, çok ilham verici.
Well, Peter, this was such an inspiring presentation for us. And as I mentioned while I was presenting him, this is basically a history that we're not very familiar with, and he provided us with a great background. And after this introduction, this idea of memorialization and this practice of remembering things, he actually linked them with statistics and what kind of events could be formulated and devised so that we could reach out wider communities and groups. He presented great examples. We would like to thank you for this presentation. Now, over to Aslı, representing 23.5 Site of Memory. She will talk about the general framework of that, and she will talk about education activities run at the Site of Memory. Good afternoon, everyone. I will also have a presentation.
Çok teşekkürler. Eminim.
Well, thank you very much. Probably there are people who work in the same field. I was learning about a cyber museum, and you probably felt quite inspired as well. As I was listening to you, I was just looking at all those moments of inspiration. Eileen made a great introduction about sites of memory, and I will talk about the learning programs of 23.5, Hrant Site of Memory, but I will also talk about the learning programs provided by Hrant Foundation in general. Well, 23.5 Site of Memory, I was a coordinator for visitor programs. I'm in charge of the workshops and the general framework and the guided tours, and I'm also in charge of the programs. I also have certain responsibilities related with the workshops and other educational content organized for the foundation. That is why I have frequent encounters with the Site of Memory and with the foundation. I have also become the owner of many experiences that have been generated in the course of all our activities. There are many people that I know. I have seen familiar faces with us here, but for those who don't know us, I would like to start by talking about 23.5 Hrant Site of Memory. It was inaugurated in 2019, and it was the old headquarters of Agos newspaper, hosted and housed by Sebat apartment. It is basically an embodiment of hope for us. After Hrant Dink was assassinated in front of the Sabat apartment building, it was turned and converted into a place for us to remember him and to mourn about him. And actually, we took a deep dive into an archival work of 4.5 years. When you take a step inside, you see a very rich content and a lot of archives and videos. And when you look at the content of the videos, there are many questions that are posed to visitors, and these questions are always answered by Hrant Dink. So Hrant Dink is the main narrator at the site. So the main reason why it has been such a great archival work was that everything looks quite simple. And to all those questions, you may also be asking them, and you hear answers to them from Hrant Dink in videos in which he appears and in which he speaks. This archival work and this preparatory or preliminary preparation period, they all resulted in different forms of content. And as we are creating different visitors programs, it was quite important for us to emphasize the place of Sebat apartment building. We also wanted to point attention to the place that Hrant Dink holds for us in our memories, and we all gathered these important points together in the site of memory. Because Hrant Dink was struggling for certain values, and when we look at these values closely, human rights, equal citizenship, democracy for all, justice and freedom were all the general and fundamental concepts that he always promoted and upheld. And this is why we always wanted to open our doors to wider groups and wider communities and everyone. And we are basically dwelling into these values, and we are presenting these values that also represent Hrant Dink, but we also exhibit the story of Agos newspaper, the struggle of Hrant Dink. We also exhibit the process that actually led to his assassination. Human rights violations and other rights issues are also among the topics covered by the workshops, and talking about discriminatory practices and how to really address and tackle these kinds of discriminatory practices. These are all the questions that the visitors take away when they leave the place. This is also a site that allows people to ask these questions themselves as well. Yes, the position of sites of the position that sites of memories holds, they are important, and these sites play an important role when it comes to confrontation with the past. And Peter was also talking about that as we were creating the site of memory. The background was quite important, and in our case, Sibir Museum is another region, but we see quite similar practices and similar backgrounds as well. As we are talking about different sites of memories, we need to talk about the functions that they carry out. Yes, they are places for us to remember, for us to reinforce empathy, and these are places for us to face and reconcile with the truth. And learning practices and training courses are run, and visitors are provided with the chance of having a dialogue and having different encounters with different people. This is a place of activism for us as well. And these sites are also places for expressing ourselves, expressing our own narratives and stories, and all those stories that have a place in social memory. And from this vantage point, as I am talking about the content of the programs, I also wanted to talk about the functions that they carry here. For example, the sites of memory are important for us, and we are going to celebrate its 18th year in 2025. This is a place where we gather in our commemorations for the 19th of January, the date that Hrant Dink was assassinated. Yes, we commemorate him, but we also organize additional events so that we can approach the issue from different perspectives. For example, dialogues for truth. So this was a program that we ran at the site of memory. We discussed the legal proceedings and confrontation with the truth, and we looked at the history of the site of memory and how we could really reconfigure sites of memory from this perspective, and how we can really involve young people in this process. Aylin, you mentioned that, and as we are planning these kinds of dialogues for truth, we also ask questions to ourselves. This was an assassination that was perpetrated some 17 years ago, 18 years ago, but we're talking about a long process actually. And after this incident, after this assassination, many people who were born on this date can go to universities right now. They are eligible to vote right now. So we are in a different part of our lives right now. And it is thanks to these series of events, it is thanks to these guided tours that we gather with different participants and visitors. We talk about this process, we talk about and discuss the process that culminated in the legal proceedings. And this is also a chance for us to talk about a rights-based struggle, which is compelling for young people as well, because we have the assumptions that they are not really familiar with this process. So that we also open up a space for them, hold a space for them to remember and to learn about the history of this site. And by the way, the site of memory was founded on a date that was right in the middle of 23rd of April and 24th of April, 23.5, which is actually a association of an essay written by Hrant Dink. It is an essay that brings together hope and despair, because he actually in this piece talks about his experience as an Armenian staying in this land on the date that this republic was established, and different activities and events are therefore carried out and organized and held. This is an alternative way of remembering and commemorating him. And this year we have also invited visitors for an alternative future and an alternative way of commemorating him. And in the meantime, we have asked participants to bring their stories and to bring their narratives from families. And when they brought their exhibits, they provided different contributions to us as well. And in that process, alternative workshops were also carried out. Maybe you should also be aware of the content that we establish from this perspective, but there are different workshop runners and hosts who run their individual workshops as well. For example, the 23rd of April is the Festival for Children, and we invited children for that. Neslihan Koyuncu is an artist that ran the workshop, and she is presenting the Venice Biennale and pieces from Sarkis, an Armenian artist, and mirrors were placed in the workshop, and children were invited to use different colors and paints like a rainbow. Sarkis was preparing and creating this piece of art in 2015, and he was actually alluding to the hope that the children will carry for the future, and this is the very essence of the content. And children and childhood, this issue is quite important, and you can see that at many points of the site of memory, 23.5. This is why on the festival for children that is organized on the 23rd of April, children had the chance to talk about the essence of Sarkis's work, and they left their fingerprints as well in a lasting fashion. Yes, we presented this event. We organized this event for children, but in the bottom row you can see two different photographs, and these are photographs from different workshops. And we organized a workshop in which adults could talk about their childhood as well in the company of Hera Büyüktaşyan. And again, participants are asked to bring their memories and exhibits from their own childhood, and it didn't have to be an object or it didn't have to be a property whatsoever. They could just bring their own memories, and when they took a step inside, they worked with artist Hera Büyüktaşyan. They used different materials to combine with magazines and threads and fibers, and the memory that they brought, they actually had the chance to transform them with different objects, and we asked them to present their reconfigured memory. Yes, there are also collaborations that we maintain with different schools and institutions, but these workshops are always open to the public, accessible to the public. So 15 people, 20 people coming together, they don't know about each other. And when they come in, they remember their family stories, their mothers, and what they experienced. Many things they remember, and they have encounters during which they have the chance to exchange all these stories and memories. And this is a series of workshops and events that we organize between 23rd and 24th of April. And in the meantime, we also organize guided tours, and hopefully we're going to organize them every year on the 24th of April. This was the initial version. Nesim Ovadia, a researcher, and it was thanks to his guidance that we held a tour around Pangaltı in the neighborhood. And this was only one of the events that we organized for memory, and you will see pictures of that.
We may have some time to also look into other workshops, but we also have some permanent tours, permanent activities. As Piotr has already mentioned, there are guided tours that many museums organize on a permanent basis. And when it comes to our site of memory, we always pay attention to create an environment of genuine conversation. We don't want to see it as a one-side or one-way communication from the tour guide to the visitors, but we also want them to be more interactive. So we have some guided tours, interactive guided tours. We also open online calls to invite our visitors. So we also discuss our common struggle, our ways of struggling together, and we also look into the life and struggle of Hrant Dink, and while doing so, we also question the country's history as well. But of course, we also think of how to attract visitors to the site of memory and how to keep them engaged, because most of the topics are not appealing for young people nowadays. That's why asking them to generate their own content, just create themselves would be quite important. That's why we have a new workshop series for young people aged 14 to 25. So we organized this under the title of We Discover the Hrant Dink Site of Memory. So we have put together a map, but this is a different type of map. It has some questions, and these questions allow our visitors to deep dive into different sections of the site of memory, but also into the topics. So once we have our visitors, we just offer them a very brief introduction about the site of memory, and then we provide them these maps, and we ask them to explore and discover the site of memory by themselves. Some of them want to do this exploration individually, some of them come together with their groups in 2, in 3, and then we also ask them to reflect on the questions presented on the map. And of course, these questions are very much related to the site of memory itself. One example, if Hrant Dink was alive today, what would you talk with him? Or if you would be starting a newspaper, what title would you give to this newspaper? So we have such questions that are related with the story of the site of memory. And then we also discuss their issues, on the issues that they would like to focus on, or the ideas that they put forward. So after their visit, we end the day with a joint discussion by gathering everyone in the same room. Here, peer learning is quite important, because then we see young people interacting with one another in a safe space. They are able to ask any questions, and they're able to freely express things they like or dislike. For instance, another question I asked to our young visitors: what would you change in the site of memory? So this is a safe space we offer to them, where we can have this genuine conversation. Another regular workshop we organize is about the sites of memory. As I informed you, we took almost 5 years to prepare ourselves for putting together the site of memory. First of all, the notion of site of memory is not familiar to people at all, and perhaps 23.5 is one of the rare examples of this in the country. So we have observed that there is a gap and there is a need to actually raise awareness on this topic. So the Hrant Dink Foundation visited different countries, including Latin America and Africa. And Nayat Karaköse, she's one of the founders of the Hrant Dink Site of Memory. So she has organized all these study visits, and then she wrote reports, and then she keeps sharing her experiences visiting other sites of memory with these workshop participants. And of course, again, site of memory concept is new to Turkey. It's not exactly a museum. That's why it is important for us to invite, let's say, university students or architects or young people working on memory studies, likewise researchers. So we offer the space to exchange some practices from other countries, how they deal with the past. And of course, this space also welcomes any input from previous visitors of sites of memory, so we also had a chance to listen to their individual experiences. Yet another workshop we organized on a regular basis is the one that we organized at the room of Hrant Dink, editor's room. So at his room, we look into the Armenian culture because we also want to contribute to the Armenian culture and to the sustainability of that culture. And we do this through exploring different objects in his room. There are portraits, photographs, objects that are related to Armenian history and Armenian culture. So some of these objects were Hrant Dink's personal possessions, or some of them were gifts offered to him over a certain period of time. So through these portraits and objects, we discuss Armenian history, Armenian culture. We also discuss pre-1915 and post-1915. So how 1915 impacted Armenians overall. We also listen to some songs. We talk about songs. So this is a 2.5-hour interactive workshop. And we usually have 8 to 10 participants. We gather in Hrant Dink's editor room. By the way, most of the workshops, most of the activities we organize, they also have online versions. For instance, our guided tours, you can also take our online guided tour. Likewise, the Armenian Culture and History workshop is also offered online. There is an online module. Just 2 days ago, we organized an event. These are photographs. Artist Damla Sandal held a workshop on memory. Again, the artist invited participants to bring along an object, perhaps a postcard they had in their possession, something important for them. And then our workshop leader first taught the participants how to do a certain form of art, embroidery, and later on they use these embroidery techniques to piece together their postcards or objects. So just imagine 15 participants who do not really know about one another. They are actually remembering and calling their memories and sharing it with other people. So here we once again experience the power of memory and sharing. And by the way, most of the participants were women, and they actually shared their stories of mothers, their grandmothers, so all these untold stories. So it has a very strong empowering aspect. And of course, we do not really leave out any emotions. All emotions are welcome. So it was also quite sentimental, but more empowering, I would say. So one of the areas that we kept intact is Hrant Dink's own room, and another area that is still intact as the when this space was a ghost newspaper is the kitchen, because kitchen was also quite active when the newspaper was being prepared, being published, and we still use it as a kitchen, and we use it as a meeting point. So actually, throughout January 19, throughout the week where we remember Hrant Dink, and also throughout April 24 commemoration day for Armenian genocide. For instance, we actually cook together here. We have halwa, something we cook for remembrance. Or when it's time for the Easter, we also paint, cook and paint eggs here. We do that with children. So on various occasions, we bring together our visitors in and around the kitchen, and we also converse with them. Two more workshops. I'll try to be very brief. So these are some important activities organized by Hrant Dink Foundation. So Belgium-based Bellevue Foundation has this methodology. It's Cities of Democracy. So we adopted this from the museum. So this is a game, a democratic city game we play with children. So here we put children into different groups, and then they discuss their own vision of a democratic city, what they would like to see in a city, what they don't want to see in a city. So here they experience building a democratic city themselves. We sometimes visit schools and we play these games in a school setting, or we also invite the kids and students to Hrant Dink's site of memory. Yet another workshop that the foundation has been organizing actually for a very long time is rights-based life workshops. The foundation has an oral history program where it collects testimonials of witnesses. So as part of this workshop, participants watch these oral history video recordings, and building on these oral history accounts, they discuss their own perspectives on history, on individual accounts. And this is a workshop that really reinforces empathy. We have two modules. One is on representation in the public sphere, and the second module is on collective memory and coexistence. Last but not least, I'm aware I took a lot of time from the panel, but on the other hand, I just felt that we actually do a lot of activities. Perhaps one of the most well-known activities of the foundation is the Inclusive Discourse Workshop. Hrant Dink himself has been a target of hate speech on media, particularly from 2004 to 2007, 3 years before his assassination. Hence, this has been one of the preliminary activities of the foundation. The foundation has been doing media watch on hate speech. So yes, there is hate speech. Yes, there is disinformation. But in order to counter that, we want to use the technique of inclusive discourse. This is how we designed our inclusive discourse workshop. So we talk about discrimination, stereotype, hate speech, discriminatory speech. And once participants are introduced these terms and notions, they analyze themselves various news pieces. They identify or detect hate speech or discriminatory speech. We do group work. We share our findings, and then they also try to come up with an inclusive alternative to this discourse. We also visit schools. We can also apply this to students of 20 plus years of age. We also have participants from NGOs or municipalities also working with migrants. So it is a quite a broad target group, and we can adapt it to actually any target group. But this brings me down to where I started. So all these workshops elaborate on the values that Hrant Dink himself has been promoting and now embraced by the foundation. Thank you very much indeed. Aslı has provided us in bullet points all this impressive work that the foundation has been doing, but I would like to just refer to one of the activity that I find very impressive. So this is a site of memory that really transforms, and it gives us a chance to encounters, to make encounters. And the site of memory itself has a great construct. It has been, a lot of thought has been put into its design in a way, because all these workshop participants are able to contribute to the site of memory. They are also providing their perspective on thinking of or designing new events. For instance, you kept the kitchen as a space, so it also continues its function, and it's all so inspiring. Thank you very much for all their efforts. So as the moderator of this panel, I also now have to provide additional information in order to cover Veronica's input. I would like to tell you about a digital platform. This is a platform we started working on in 2021, and then in 2022 we opened an online memory museum for historical justice. So this all started as an academic study with a concept note, but over time through literature review and oral histories and analyzing objects, we have brought together researchers from these different disciplines. Eylem Delikanlı, our co-director Hülya Deveci, Özlem Delikanlı, and I myself, Aylin Tekiner. We are the main founders of this memory museum, so all women. We have 4 important collections: oral history, trial documents, court cases, memory collection, and quest for justice collection. So we have these 4 categories, and overall Memory Museum for Historical Justice is the one and only collective memory study on the 1980 coup of Turkey. And it's the first online initiative, because the 1980 coup used to be reduced down to a narration that this was just a confrontation between the east and between the right and left wing groups. But we as women, we wanted to just provide an alternative, a counter narrative to this, and we also wanted to build history from bottom up. And of course, we wanted to create a museum, and given the today's political circumstances, it was not possible to come up with a physical museum. Now that people who experienced the 1980 coup, so the very subjects of the coup, are still alive, we felt the need to collect their testimonials and open it to public using the tools available technology tools. So on this website, you have an access to our collections, but all these collections, in fact, are intertwined, because we have initially started this project as a mapping exercise, because as part of the 1980 coup, we had the martial law and the martial courts, and then courts also decided for execution of people, human rights violations. So we want, and there has been a lot of torture cases. So we wanted to bring everything together, and as a primary source of verification. So all these court proceedings and oral testimonies, they serve as a primary means of verification for us, and we wanted to compile everything in this map. And because our memory museum does not have any physical space, does not have a physical building, we wanted to organize a very comprehensive exhibition last year on the anniversary of the coup. And together with the museum's co-founders, we have engaged a curator, and we tried to envision what would the memory museum look like if we actually had a physical space. So we had an exhibition that was on display for 2 to 3 months in Depot, Istanbul, and we have seen a great potential, particularly among young people, young people who were not even born during the coup, who did not really even have their own experience, who have not really heard a lot of stories about the coup from their parents, but they understand how the 1980 coup impacted Turkey in such a significant way. This included high school students, university students, and we didn't expect such interest from them. And once we noticed that young people are interested, we started organizing guided tours for them. So the exhibition had more than 4,000 visitors, most of them young people. We also had the chance to discuss the 1982 constitution, like a post-coup constitution, and also post-coup institutions such as YÖK, Higher Education Council of Turkey. So it has been an outstanding space of encounter for us. We also came together with the very witnesses of the 1980 coup. Some of them were among our advisors, so we had the chance to bring together witnesses of the coup who were university students back then and with the university students of today. What it meant to be a university student at that time, what solidarity meant at that time, what culture of organizing meant. So these have been among the questions we explored together. And we have the website, bellekmüzesi.org, and we did our best to refrain from the pornography of violence. We don't have to put violence so bluntly in order to show its impact. So we looked for creative ways of conveying the violence with this method. So this is how we discussed torture with young people, high school students and university students.
Önemli bir
Well, this is a digital museum, and it had a quite important physical aspect to it, and one was actually our encounters with universities and university students. We actually targeted different age groups, and we learned a lot from them. Actually, this provides us with an amazing space actually. And one example is an event organized by Tulin Salam and Cevdet Balam. This is democracy. This is themed democracy. This is actually an unparalleled content. Drama techniques in education were deployed, and shadow theater has also been deployed here. Actually, an area of confrontation and conflict and how to resolve it. This is actually the question that is posed to participants, and from their own identities, they actually strip themselves of their own identities by deploying the techniques of shadow theater, and this way they acquire the chance to look at the incidents unfolding from another person's perspective. And we were able to run this with students, with university students. Maybe we'll have the chance to delve into that. But for those who work in the field of memory in education, one challenge is, especially in countries like Turkey, formal education is an area that is almost banned to us. In an Anatolian high school, for example, we're unable to run these kinds of activities. And one handicap, one obstacle that we face here is that we have found ways to speak with people on the same ground as us, because there are different classes, there are different identities that we want to come together with, and we need spaces where we can bring them together, where we can learn together. And creating platforms like that is not really easy in countries like Turkey, and this kind of a challenge, we can actually address that with other participants and panelists here. And without further ado, I'd also like to provide the opportunity with all the spectators here to ask questions as well. But one thing that I find quite beneficial is groups running memorial works and activities in Turkey, and all those people who have had endeavors to establish platforms like that in Turkey. We share a motivation here. Well, Turkey is a country where confrontation practices are not really present, or where accountability is lacking, and we cannot really enter into restorative justice practices either. And memory activists, one thing that we always point your attention to is as follows. We always have to underline the truth. We always have to expose the truth. And we are going to create a site of memory, but at the same time we are creating a site of truth, and this is a site of struggle as well. And this is something that really ties to today. Without us understanding 1915, we cannot really understand 1938, and without that we cannot really understand pogroms or the coups. We need to tie them all together, and we can only read history only if we bring them together. For example, the September 12th, this was an important breaking point, turning point for us, but we need to see what happened before that and what happened after that. We don't want the similar incidents to take place, and we need to find ways to say no, never. And this is a hope that I wanted to drop as I'm concluding, and now I'm opening the Q&A session.
Congratulate the Hrant Dink Foundation to organize today's discussion about such an important issue, which is the remembrance and memorialization. Many times in the past, I had the opportunity to discuss this issue with my late dear friend, Rantnik himself. Also, thanks to Eileen, Asli, and Piotr to bring their experiences about documenting, archiving, such atrocities of the past, which is very, very important. And to have the experiences of democracy and, let's say, freedom taught to the new generation. But is it enough? First, humanity doesn't learn from the past painful experiences. Also, no matter where in the world, historic violence and painful past have a common denominator. The important point is how to approach, how to handle the attacks on historic truths, which should be reminded to the present and future generations so that it never happens again. For this purpose, is it enough to have a memory site or to archive the records of painful facts in museums or history records? Generally worldwide, many countries recognize such violence against humanity and agree to build memory sites for them. The real difficulty is the recognition and acceptance of such an historic fact by persons of entities who did this violence and who unfortunately systematically and purposely refuse to accept reality and the responsibility of such a painful past. Denial is not an intelligent solution, on the contrary. More than memory site. Of course, it's important. I'm not discussing or criticizing anything. Thank you, Piotr, for your activities, and Asli, and also Eileen. No problem. It is very important to have an official recognition by the leaders or decision makers of whoever did such violence, followed by a constructive discussion between the two parties, which will bring peace, healing, mutual respect, and fruitful future relations. So I think at this moment, let's say, new generation, yes, of course, they should be taught, educated, and warned against such atrocities. But at the same time, to see the possibilities of bringing the leaders of these both sides together for better understanding, respect, and peaceful solution to these problems of the past. Because these problems of atrocities, they are never resolved, forgotten. Thank you.
If I may address for a while, thank you for these remarks. I wanted to say that using both our experience as the museum and experience of my colleagues from museums of former Nazi death camps in Poland, because we are in constant contact, it is important for such institutions to exist because each year we are getting less and less witnesses of this. And the main goal of existence of such institutions and collecting the oral history, the testimonies, is to be the voice of those people when they're gone. So for us, the main goal was to build the museum when we still have those people, the Sibiraks, surviving among us. So they can say, and they said actually, this is our house, and that was very brutal what they said next, but on the other hand it was true. Most of them said, now we can die, because we have a place which will speak when there is none of us alive. And that was, for me personally, because I heard it personally, it was on one hand tragic, because it's in front of our eyes, less and less of those people. But on the other hand, we felt the mission behind this institution. And to address the next part of your speech, of course, it would be good to have these meetings of leaders. But I will give you an example of Polish-Russian relations. Before the war, there was an institution, a Polish-Russian dialogue center. After the invasion on Ukraine, it was one-sidedly by the Russians. All of the relations were cancelled. Of course, it was a result of the EU sanctions and other approaches. But even if we try to contact with our friends from Russia, because we have friends from Russia, we were cooperating with archives, with documentation centers, with the Memorial group. Most of these contacts ceased to exist, apart from the people who escaped Russia to the EU, to Poland and other countries. So there could be a meeting, but there needs to be will from both sides. And now there is will only from one side. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's true.
Only recognition will bring peace
That's a great example.
to the people who suffered such violence. This is whatever, I wish one day happens. And it continues, the history is continuing.
Of course.
In, let's say, Palestine, in there, different places of the world. And this is really sad. It's really sad.
And I'd like to touch upon a small point. Thank you very much for your contribution and input. Well, crimes against humanity and collecting proof and evidence to expose crimes against humanity, and testimonials, official documents, and documents that are examined as part of legal proceedings. So whatever the type of the document that you're collecting, creating proof and evidence is quite important. And although the witnesses or those who have seen it are not alive, but it is quite important to collect them when they're alive, and this is a great contribution to future generations as well. And this Human Rights Archive, I'm speaking on behalf of the Memory Museum here, and this was one of our key motivations to collect all these pieces of evidence, body of evidence, and all those interlocutors at the level of leaders, and to help establish democracy. This is actually a process, but historical justice, this concept says one thing to us. Yes, until this process comes, can we do something else? Because historical justice, well, in countries like ours, well, domestic law or international law do not really offer you a space, because there are statute of limitations, there are state secrets, there are some insurmountable walls in the sphere of law. And historical justice, this concept, is beneficial because we are creating a common history from up to the bottom, and this applies to all different activities for memory, for historical periods in which state violence has taken place.
Hrant Dink Foundation again for creating such safe havens for us under this oppressive regime. So why are we here? Because Hrant Dink was assassinated when I was a university student. Now I teach at a university. We still have one-man regime, AKP. And actually Turkey's history can be interpreted as the history of assassinated journalists. Just to name a few: Abdi İpekçi, Ümit Kaftancıoğlu, Çetin Emeç, Musa Anter, Uğur Mumcu, Metin Göktepe, Ahmet Taner Kışlalı, Hrant Dink, Bahriye Üçok, Tahir Elçi, he was not a journalist, but still, and Gonca Kuriş, she was not a journalist, but she was also a human rights activist. So if you read the history of Turkey, you can read the history from these assassinations. And I believe, the murderers haven't paid anything. The murderer of Hrant Dink is outside o gün Samans because of the destruction of the judicial system. Again, one-man rule party. He's free outside. He can kill anyone at any day. And we are exposed to actually everyday disasters. every single day we wake up to a brand new disaster. One day babies are killed, another day a girl is kidnapped, and today the mayors are arrested, essentially the Kurdish mayors, one from CHP and two from HDP, and the brand new officials are appointed to the government. So I'm surprised how we keep our mental health to come here and to do these discussions, actually. We have a dememorialization. You talk about memory and memorial places, but people in Turkey are exposed to such disasters in order to make us forget and eventually, just to survive, to lead our daily lives and be grateful for that. So I believe Poland is also ruled by extreme right, wing. Am I?
Not anymore.
Not thanks God.
But we had for 8 years this similar situation.
Imagine 20 years.
Poland, Hungary,
counting.
And Turkey. Yes,
yeah. So do you have everyday strategies in order to cope with such a oppressive and tyrannic regime, in order to, at least cope with this kind of situations? I think this is being done on purpose, by the way, by the AKP government, so that we could be just everyday survivors. So can you come up with any everyday strategies?
Thank you for that question. It's a bit difficult, and I will address it in two fields, because one field is the situation in Poland was not at this level as it is in Turkey. It was, of course, difficult. There was a extremist right-wing party, but it was trying to catch some of the power. They didn't make it in the case of courts, for instance. It was a struggle, and the Constitution Court and others, which is discussed right now among the historians and sociologists. Anyway, what I wanted to say is we are understanding your situation in a different field, because Poland was under Russian rule for 123 years in 19th century, and for the communist rule in 20th century, so altogether it's 2.5 centuries. And we were punished for being patriots, for being Poles, for using our language, for living our lives exactly as you said. And the message of hope, which is most important for such communities like yours, is that the bigger is the pressure, the stronger you get. It's always like this, because in Poland, for those 2 centuries, we were victims of various types of terror, Russian than Soviet, and it made us stronger, actually. Now we can say, and most of people in Poland would agree with that they are defined by this pressure, okay? Our ability to resist is defined by this pressure. So if it brings any hope, it's that in the case of Poles, we made it finally in 1989, after 2 centuries of being under the Russian heel in different forms. And nowadays, still we are struggling for some problems, but it's getting better slowly, but it is. So maybe this will bring some hope. In the case of the ruling party, it's a bit difficult, because the museum we were creating was a municipal museum, and the municipal government was against the ruling party, making things simple. We had some problems with it, yes, but in general, Białystok is such a small city that it was on the, let's say, margin of the main politics, and we somehow managed. So there was no strategy against, but it was no strategy because it wasn't really needed. We had some minor situations, but no threat, no real threat from the governing party in that time. I don't know if it was because the official policy against Russia was by both parties, the ruling one and the opposition. So I talked to some of the employees here of the Handing Foundation, that in Poland, the ruling party and the opposition share one thing. They don't really like Russians. So this topic is safe, quite safe. So we were not really on the basis of a tax. Okay.
Merhaba, çok teşekkür.
Well, hello. Thank you very much for this panel. And my question is going to be about Poland. Well, sites of memory in Turkey, when you look at it, as far as I can observe, we're not talking about yesterday. We are also making a reference to today, and we are actually presenting our discourse for the day, and we have interpretations and we have statements for the things that are taking place today. And is this a case for you in your site of memory? And do you face any challenges as you're talking about present challenges? Because sites of memory in Turkey are dissidents here, and as we are generating our discourse, we always have this compulsion to censor ourselves. And I wonder what kind of challenges you face in financial matters, in your relations with the government, and as you're generating your discourse, how is your relations with these parties impacted?
Question. The fact of financing by the municipality, not the central government, allowed us to have some freedom, both of speech and of approach towards the topic. And also the museum was created by a team that is closely related to the Faculty of History of Białystok University. So cooperation with the scientists, with the historians, made us a kind of a safe background that this project, this program of creating this museum is run by professionals. The politics was not really a topic. During the construction, the building of the museum, I find it both because of this policy against Russia, or like relations, Polish-Russian relations, and the location of the museum not in the capital of Poland, because we had some struggles in other museums, central museums, in Warsaw, the capital, in Gdańsk, the World War II museum. So there were some struggles in those grand projects. And the other thing is, which we are very proud of, we are one of the cheapest museums built in Poland in the 21st century. Of course, we were supported by EU grants, but I will give you an example. Nowadays, a museum of Polish history is being finalized, and it costs like 500 million euros estimatedly. Our museum costed 10 million euros. So you can have this comparison of prices, and it's really one of the cheapest museums, so we didn't really struggle for financing. Now the sustainability of the museum is helped by the use of solar power panels for the electricity, for instance, some other programs that reduce the use of electricity and waste. So we made a museum that is also ecologically friendly, but it reduced some of the costs of the maintenance. And having this long time perspective helped us reaching this. I'm not saying it's easy to maintain, but it's easier than most of the museums in Poland, okay? Of course, we cannot talk only about business project. It's not a business project. It doesn't give money to the government, the municipal government. It still needs municipal money to be run. Most of it, it's like 90% is funded by the municipality and 10 or 15% by the income from the tickets. But still, we do as much as we can to reduce this sum of money that's need to be spent, okay? So it was not really a struggle, but we are a young institution. We will see in 10 or 15 years what will be the outcome. Maybe it will change. As for now, we do as much as we can to reduce the costs and maintain a high level of professionalism with the exhibitions, with the programs. We start to apply for EU grants, for other foundation grants, in this very moment, to do it before it's too late. So it will be a question in several years, I guess, but in our opinion, and our goal is maybe to do it as soon as possible, to have money secured to run the museum and to have it for the programs.
Çok benzer bir şey soracaktım aslında.
I have a similar question, but I would like to first thank you for this panel and all panelists. It has been inspiring, particularly this learning programs. I can see that sites of memory are more creative, more innovative. They offer more interactive learning spaces as opposed to hierarchical structures of schools, because sites of memory and museums, they allow us to build connections. And of course, there are many more examples of sites of memory in Europe. Unfortunately, we don't see many examples here in Turkey. By the way, I am also well aware that it's not easy to work with young people, and in all your examples, you mentioned that young people are very much into present day, what's happening in present day. So it's not always an easy task to talk about the history, about the past with young people. So here is my question: how do you build or connect or bridge this relationship between the past and present? What methodologies you use, or what methodologies you would prefer in order to open a space for sites of memory, especially for young people, and to make it more appealing for young people? What methods you think might be more appealing and interesting for youth? Thank you very much for this question. In fact, the biggest treasure, I have to say, we have in our hands is 23.5 Hrant Dink site of memory, because Hrant Dink is the main narrator and he uses very simple yet strong words in his expression. And then, yes, we use different methods. We host both high school students and university students. And the information that we convey to them changes also from a pedagogical point of view. But overall, when we look into Hrant Dink and how he narrates what happened in the past, he has always denied the practice of talking about history based on numbers, based on the number of victims. He, in fact, has himself offered us different ways of dealing with the past. For instance, we have a room in the site of memory called Civilization of Atlantis, and there is a map, and you see a map of Turkey, present-day Turkey, and you see that the Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians in Turkey have their own public places like churches, synagogues, hospitals, schools. So this map also shows the existence of these three different groups. And as we have visitors, we have a conversation right next to the map. We ask them where they are from, their neighborhood, their city, and then they have this encounter with the churches in their own city. And we also ask them about their grandparents. We ask if their grandparents have encountered different ethnic groups, or if they encounter with different ethnic groups today, and if not, what might be the reason. So we try to spark some discussions around this map. For instance, we ask another question: when you look into the past, a century ago, how many Armenian schools were there in the country? And they usually say 100, 200. The most generous answer would be 500, but in fact, there used to be 1,400 schools only of the Armenian community. And right now, we only have 16 Armenian schools in present-day Turkey. All of them are in Istanbul, so there are no longer Armenian schools across Anatolia. So this is a way of dealing with the past with students, young people. And we also offer guided tours. And it becomes very obvious that there are no background information. For instance, when we start telling Hrant Dink's story that Hrant Dink was born in Malatya in 1954, our young visitors ask, but is he originally from Malatya as well? So this indicates that young people do not really have the background. They're not really well aware that in these provinces of Anatolia, once upon a time, there were Armenians or other ethnic groups were living. And now we have also Armenian schools, very small numbers. They are operating somewhat under pressure. Yes, they have certain room of freedom, but they still are under certain limitations. And we try to give the message that we also have Greeks living in this country, and these Greek people, this is their homeland. They're not necessarily coming from Greece to Turkey. So this country is a multicultural, multi-ethnic country. So we try to just convey these messages. So in a nutshell, we try to adopt and take on different perspectives to history and dealing with the past. And let me also try to offer what we do in our memory museum. Our main title of the exhibition was "The Past is Today." So the past is today. And unfortunately, all the processes that hollowed our institutions, undermined democracy, this process is still going on. Yes, we had the 1980 coup d'etat, but there is a significant lack of awareness about what happened back then. And that's why we need different methods, creative methods, to have a better understanding of what had happened. So our memory museum seeks to defend democracy. And we do this through workshops by bringing together scholars from different disciplines. So it's all about defending democracy, just being in solidarity with someone else, also advocating their rights. So through various workshops, we try to work on these issues. And of course, it is not an easy task. As I just mentioned earlier on, we have a very broad spectrum of our target group. We would like to see a broad spectrum. We would like to see more young people, but then not everyone is brave enough to fully work on memory studies. People do not really want to take the risk. So that's why memory studies are somewhat confined to a more limited space, but there is no other way. We need to make best use of available technologies and expand the space.
Let's say, express two things to address your question. One is that when we were preparing the educational program in our museum, we thought that initially it should be starting with students at 12 years old, no younger. And lots of teachers, which were our friends or like we knew them from our previous jobs, asked us if we can at least try to prepare a program for younger children. And we said, okay, we can prototype it. And we did. And it was a huge, huge success, because nowadays, I didn't include it in the statistics, but most of the groups coming for educational workshops in our museum are actually groups of children between 10 and 15 years old. Of course, there are students and high school pupils, but the biggest group in the workshop is actually younger children. It was a huge challenge to address a program to them and not traumatize them, not present like cruelty that Soviets done. We are doing it in collaboration with some psychologists, with teachers. This was supervised by the local teacher training program institution, which we have in Białystok. So it was a bit, let's say, risky in the beginning, but we did it, and now we have contact with lots of those groups, and the result is pretty shocking positively, because the children who are, let's say, 12, 13, 14 years old, when they are prepared in such a workshop and then come back to us in a high school or in a university, they have a wider background. We have a place for common discussion. And this will result, because it's 3 years, it's still too early to have full data on this material, but we have groups that are coming back after 2-3 years. We have groups that were in primary school, and now in this year they came back to us in secondary or high school, and the result is good because they know what we are talking about. It's not starting from scratch. So I guess it's difficult, but it's rewarding. That's one thing. And the other thing is that when we were starting the programs and thinking what to do to attract the young people, attract is maybe a bit an inappropriate word, but make them listen and make them participate. It's this micro-history, because as my predecessors spoke, having this big picture, it's not very relevant for them. They don't feel associated unless it's happening right now, of course, like the conflict in Ukraine. For instance, when it started, we had a big number of groups from high schools where students of high schools wanted to learn about the situation in Russia because it's happening right now. They felt related. But before that happened, we had this relation to microhistory, and what was surprising, we asked the teenagers when they are back home to ask their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents if maybe they have such a story in their families. And if they have, record it, bring it to the museum, you can become the protagonists. And they felt now is a chance for them to speak with their parents. They like to talk a lot, okay? We need to give them tools. So this is an opportunity. 1/5 of the population of Białystok was affected by the deportation. So there's a pretty big chance to be a member of this community, but you need to search, you need to ask questions. So this results in two things. One is bringing the family closer, which in the era of social media, TikToks, Instagrams, it's a treasure, really, because people don't like to talk to each other. But if we start to talk with children, the results might be shocking, positively again. And the second thing is that in this way, you make people feel that their family story is important. They are, let's say, encouraged to learn that story. So if they feel this positive impact, they feel it's bringing something positive to their lives. So this is inspiration, and that's very important.
Çok teşekkür ederiz.
Thank you very much for all your questions and input. Unfortunately, time is up for this panel. Thank you very much for our audience for being with us today, and of course all our panelists for their valuable insights.